There was a time when Earth had no trees, no forests stretching across continents, no towering trunks, no shaded canopies whispering in the wind. Imagine standing on a vast landscape where nothing rises above your height, where the horizon is open in every direction, and the ground is covered not by grass, but by strange, unfamiliar life forms that seem more alien than natural. This was not a barren world. It was alive, but in a way that feels almost impossible to recognize today. To understand this lost Earth, it helps to step back more than 400 million years, long before the first tree ever rooted itself into soil. During this distant era, known as the early Paleozoic, the continents themselves were arranged differently, clustered in ways that shaped climates and oceans unlike anything seen now. The land was mostly empty at first glance, but that emptiness was deceptive. Life had already begun its quiet invasion of land, creeping out from the oceans in forms that would lay the foundation for everything that followed. The earliest plants were not trees, and they were not even close. They lacked the structures we associate with modern vegetation. No wood, no deep roots, no complex leaves. Instead, these ancient organisms were small, simple, and low to the ground. Some resembled mosses, hugging damp surfaces, while others stood upright only a few centimeters tall, their thin stems branching in ways that look primitive by today's standards. One of the earliest known land plants, Cooksonia, lived around 430 million years ago. It was little more than a slender stalk with a bulb at the tip where spores were released into the air. It had no leaves, no roots in the modern sense, and certainly no trunk. Yet it marked a turning point. It showed that life could survive outside water, drawing nutrients from the soil and exchanging gases with the atmosphere. This was the beginning of a transformation that would eventually reshape the entire planet. At this stage, Earth's surface looked more like a patchwork of green films and scattered clusters than anything resembling a forest. The ground was often damp, with early plants depending on moisture to reproduce. Without seeds or flowers, they relied on spores, which required water to complete their life cycles. This meant they thrived near rivers, coastlines, and wetlands, leaving vast dry areas relatively empty. But even in their simplicity, these plants were powerful. As they spread across land, they began to alter the atmosphere itself. Through photosynthesis, they absorbed carbon dioxide and released oxygen, slowly changing the composition of the air. Over millions of years, this process would contribute to a significant drop in atmospheric carbon dioxide levels, influencing global temperatures and paving the way for more complex ecosystems. The absence of trees did not mean the absence of diversity. By the time we reached the Silurian and early Devonian periods, plant life had already begun to experiment with new forms. Some species developed simple vascular systems, allowing them to transport water internally. This was a crucial innovation, enabling plants to grow taller and survive in slightly drier conditions. Yet even then, taller meant something very different from what it does today. The tallest plants might reach knee height, perhaps slightly more. There were no towering structures casting shadows, no layered ecosystems rising vertically into the sky. The entire landscape existed close to the ground, creating an open and exposed environment. The sky itself would have looked different as well. Without forests to break the wind, air currents moved freely across the land. Dust and spores could travel long distances, carried by breezes that encountered little resistance. The lack of deep-rooted vegetation also meant soils were less stable. Erosion was more common, and rivers carried sediments more easily, shaping landscapes in ways that modern vegetation now helps to control. As plant life continued to evolve, new forms began to emerge. During the Devonian period, often called the Age of Fishes in the oceans, something equally important was happening on land. Plants were becoming more complex, experimenting with structures that would eventually lead to the first trees. One group of plants, known as the rhiniophytes, displayed simple vascular systems and branching structures. They still lacked true leaves and roots, but they represented a step forward. Another group, the lycophytes, began to develop small leaf-like structures and more advanced vascular tissues. These changes allowed them to grow larger and spread further from water sources. Still, the world remained treeless. Even as plants reached new heights, they were nothing like the forests we know now. The land was covered in dense, low vegetation, creating a kind of green carpet interspersed with taller but still modest growths. It was a world without shade, where sunlight reached almost every surface. The absence of trees also meant the absence of many ecosystems that depend on them. There were no birds nesting in branches, no mammals climbing trunks, no insects specialized for life in canopies. In fact, animals themselves were only just beginning to explore land.